Welcome to GrowthPulse, the B2B sales podcast. You might be a salesperson. You could lead a sales team. Maybe run a business or you're a battle-tested entrepreneur. Then we built this podcast for you. Great salespeople are built, not born. We learn so much from the deals we win, but we learn even more from the deals we lose. In each episode, we bring you some of the world's leading salespeople, sales leaders, and experts in sales tech to share their best lessons from both their wins and their losses. Before we start, please check out the screen of your phone or laptop, and if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you've clicked subscribe and press that like button down below. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, click the plus sign to follow so we can let you know when we publish each new episode. If you like the episode, drop us a comment with any questions about the show. We'd love to get to know our audience. Great businesses always feature world-class salespeople, and the best salespeople are always learning. So let's jump in. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of GrowthPulse, the B2B sales podcast. I'm Dan Bartels, one of your hosts, here with my co-host, Simon Peterson. Mate, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Dan, I'm really well. Got a good episode ready to come today. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, mate, we've got one of your long-term sort of colleagues and friends, Greg Arbour, mate. I'm really excited for him to join the show. I'll give a bit of a sort of background on Greg. I mean, look, he spent 5 years consulting, or more longer than that, with sort of Anderson, Deloitte, and Serum and Strategy Consulting. A whole history with you at SAP, mate. You guys are some of these people who you thought were never going to leave the business. Pre-sales, value engineering, sales and leadership, both here and in Singapore for SAP, across HCM, strategic customers, intelligent spend. Stepped recently into CapGem, mate. This is a real coup for the show. I'm really pleased you brought him on, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's not a bad
Excellent,
guy.
Dad. Very nice to meet you.
Welcome, Greg. Welcome.
Exactly. No, thank you very much. I appreciate the welcome.
So, Greg, have I represented your history and your resume to the right level of accuracy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like most people's careers, right? Some of it is well thought through and planned and set with great ambition and lots of logic and structure, and others just happens. You go, hell, I didn't plan that. How did that happen? Be careful what you wish for, and that's kind of a little bit of, I think, the reality of how my career has gone forward. But I've had a lot of fun.
Absolutely, mate. And I guess you started in consulting, which I always think is probably the best grounding for a sales career there possibly is. You learn about companies, how they operate, how decisions are made. Tell me about how you got into consulting way back in the early days when you had lots of hair and a few less wrinkles.
Yeah, thanks, man. And so I really appreciate you pointing out the lack of hair yet again, but it's a bit
I think you got the most hair of everyone on the episode at the moment, mate. So it's all right.
Exactly. But look, I joined good old Anderson Consulting, which is dating myself, over in London, and spent a bit of time with them in Chicago, doing the whole, induction that Anderson kind of puts people through. And, I'm clearly dating myself because we were doing implementations of things like Lotus Notes at the London Stock Exchange, and it truly was a bit of a heyday of consulting. But so I completely agree with you that, one of the things that was sort of eternally drummed into you in all of those early years of my career was I landed up with, whether good luck or good fortune, I mean, I landed up working with people who were just obsessed around the value and outcome of whatever we were delivering for an end customer. And were we actually achieving that? Were we delivering the outcomes that we set out to achieve? And were we making a difference? And I think that just really stuck with me all through my career. And I think probably one of the core attributes of how I differentiated myself in a very crowded tech sales environment for many years.
Absolutely. And I think, so you did did the consulting gig for a while, and you've obviously moved over to what I consider the exciting side of tech, on the vendor side. And, I think it's a great move. And I think that's, where we first met in the early days of SAP down here in Australia. And,
That's right.
17 years later. But I think, tell me about, joining a software company like SAP for the first time. What were your early experiences? What was fun? What was different than your consulting days?
Look, I copped a bit of flack, right, from a lot of my old consulting mates that had all gone on to, very, top end firms, McKinsey's, Booz, and so the Deloitte boys, the Accenture boys had all kind of gone their different ways. And one of the things I was a little bit nervous about was one positive I'd really appreciated working in the big consulting organizations is that you were surrounded with thought leadership. There were industry captains, just having coffee next to you, having lunch next to you. And I always found it incredibly rewarding to, be curious about what these folk were doing. The project they'd be working on, smart metering with, in the future where energy trading was going, or whether that was in the mining and, the whole, idea of where pit to port would lead and what would happen. There was a lot of thought leadership. And when I made the move to technology, one of the things I was concerned about was, would I lose that kind of competitive edge, that depth in industry? And whether by good luck or lots of great planning, and I think it was a bit of a mix of both, I landed up at SAP. And, this in my perspective, why a lot of customers have stayed with SAP, why SAP continues to be the juggernaut in the tech industry, is because of its depth of industry skills, its depth of being able to lead and engage with customers around the business processes that are inherently industry specific and that they need to orchestrate every single day to stay competitive. And, so for me, I very quickly found that I was amongst colleagues, that there were people that understood industry, understood what it meant to operate within these industries and how to be successful. So I was thrilled with that, but I went on a massive learning curve as well. I probably, dare I say it, I turned up with a little bit of attitude. I was like, man, I'm a consulting guy. Like I know a lot of stuff, right? And I've been working with all these amazing Australian companies and European companies, and like I know shit, right? I really am, pretty switched on with all of this stuff. And then you move into kind of a vendor sales environment, and it's sort of like, well, that's cool. That got you the job. Now you just need to sell something here and we'll start to respect you here. It was a bit of a wake up call, right? So I found that pretty interesting.
So did you find that transition, Greg, from, okay, we're selling knowledge, or we've got, those thought leaders you mentioned who are there to either, work out what the knowledge or the insight should be, or are bringing it to a customer. I mean, that's one transaction to an organization, right? But when it transitions to, okay, now, and we've all worked within some pretty large, either German or North American organizations, etc. There are those leaders in there, and that knowledge and that thought leadership, but it only transacts in a product transaction. So did you find that engagement to be really different, the way you were selling knowledge or the way you were selling insights or that thought leadership? Did that really change from a product sale to a knowledge sale, or vice versa?
Yeah, look, it absolutely did. And he was part of the initial brief I had coming into SAP. I joined SAP really through a bit of a networking event, CXO networking event that I had always chosen to invest in. And I landed up meeting two people, a gentleman by the name of John Lombard, who today is CEO of one of NTT's organizations in this region, and a lady by the name of Geraldine McBride, who was at that time the managing director of SAP Australia. And Geraldine had kind of, sat on the sideline and watched a bit of the consulting work I'd been doing in the marketplace. And she said, you see a lot of customers, you're clearly involved in a lot of programs and pretty significant transformation programs. What would your advice be to me as MD of Australia, of SAP? And I probably, over a glass of wine, shared a bit too much of a very honest perspective on SAP leaving themselves very exposed to, big consulting houses and the value that they were driving for organizations. I was quite surprised to see how few of their sales organization truly understood the value they were delivering. And I thought that was a miss. And I thought it was a miss to capture more value on the SAP side, perhaps deepen their relationships with the C-suite and inside of a lot of organizations, and potentially create the path for an upsell. And this was long before SAP had a massive portfolio of cloud solutions that they were trying to sell as well, right? So that's kind of how it happened. I think it was about a week later, Geraldine called me up and said, I want you to come and join us. And she offered me a job to come in and, change the culture. So you're exactly right, Dan. I mean, the view was that we needed to try and pivot, and what SAP wanted to do was really move itself away from being a product-based sales organization, with deep expertise in terms of the engineering of the products and the features and functions of product, to something that was better kind of described and story told in the language of a customer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that customer language is so critically important, right? Because it's amazing how often I see in different sales organizations, irrespective of their technology or not, get so focused on the thing that they're selling, and they want to share this immense knowledge about the product of the solution they're selling. And whether it be thinking about the guy that runs my local gym and the wealth of knowledge he has, but all I care about is just getting fit and healthy. I don't really care about the ins and outs of it, right? And when a customer buys any of our technology products, all they care about is what it's going to change in their business, not how many cores is it using or what the code was used to write this compared to something else. It's that they just expect is there. So as you built that function out inside SAP, well, how did you get them to behave differently? How did you get people at the ground level, whether it be an AE or a leader or a solution engineer, to actually start to think differently about the customer?
Yeah, well, look, a couple of things. I mean, initially, as Geraldine tried to embrace me inside of the organization, my function, because it didn't exist, my role was housed within the pre-sales area of the business. And we decided to call it value engineering. There was a gentleman that I had found through the SAP ecosystem called Shakib Boudry over in Europe and in North America. Incredible guy, and had a vision for how you'd, from a methodology point of view, structure this approach to market. So I leaned on that method as an approach to build out something that was scalable and repeatable. But the rubber hit the road in terms of hard practice. My view of salespeople is that they're relatively simple people, and if you can demonstrate to a sales leader, to an account executive, how they can sell bigger, sell faster, with lower risk, with greater access to more people, the minds that matter, you don't actually have to convince them for long, right? I recall in the very early days working with the New South Wales sales manager for SAP and working with a customer in the consumer products area. And we had an account executive who was trying to sell them a version of their warehouse, SAP's latest version of the warehouse management product. And I remember sitting down with this AE and a co-colleague at the time, a gentleman by the name of Murray Bush. He and I both sat down together, and we looked at what this guy was trying to sell. And he was so excited because he'd been off to one of SAP's technology events and come back full of knowledge about why our warehouse management product was so awesome. And, we talked about it in the context of the customer we were trying to sell to. And in our CRM systems, we had a 500K opportunity that was listed for Q4 and we were sitting in Q1. And we asked him who he was talking to, and it was everyone that was related to the warehouse operations inside of this client. And we landed up putting a picture together that was very much around the supply chain of this organization and contextually why an inefficient warehouse was really just symptomatic of a much broader problem that they had in their supply chain. And the AE was like, I don't know how to have this conversation. And we said, well, that's okay. Come with us and we'll help you have the conversation. But probably the people we'll end up talking to won't know a lot of the answers to the questions we want to explore. And that's exactly what happened, where the more we really drove a really intelligent conversation around the business process execution and where the gaps were fundamentally in their supply chain, we landed up identifying a much bigger problem for the client. The net of it was that in Q2 of the very same year, we sold a 4 million Australian dollar deal with direct access to the director in charge of their supply chain function, as well as replacing a whole series of other solution sets that we landed up with. And I remember the New South Wales sales leader at the time coming to me and saying, Greg, I'm not entirely sure I understood what you did, but can you do it again?
Deal, you brought it forward 2 quarters. Just keep doing that.
Keep doing that. And
every times.
It took a while, right? Yeah, precisely right. And so, we did have to go on a journey and we had to scale it out. But a lot of it was lead by example and tickets to the SAP leadership, because it did sound like a very foreign conversation. It did sound like a very different way to go and approach organizations. And we were disrupting what was an incredibly well-oiled machine. I mean, that when I joined the SAP organization, it was arguably one of the strongest software sales organizations in the industry. Mm-hmm. And so to come in and say, we're going to do things a little differently was quite bold, right? Mm-hmm. And, we knew we needed to do that through some very tangible examples and showcase what good looked like. And then we would take people on the journey with us, standing there with PowerPoint slides and a whole transformation methodology. It was never going to work.
Hmm. Interesting, Greg.
Tell me more about that. I'm really interested about that little bit there. Sorry, Simon, but
I was going to say
it's so it's not about the slides. It's not about a transformation deck. But the thing that I heard you share in that story just a moment ago was about how you accessed significantly higher leadership than what this particular salesperson was originally engaged at. They were kind of siphoned into a particular part of an organization. They were just talking to the warehouse team. And then you built out a story around, and you did a whole bunch of research, I'm assuming as well, before you talked to the customer, but a story around, solving a much, much bigger, say, a business problem that you could see was there. How did you actually open the door to talk to the other people wider in the business? Because that's a thing that I think lots of salespeople really struggle with. I've got my champion. I'm talking to my guy. Hey, if I ring, 3 levels above him, it's going to piss my guy off. I don't want to, upset that person. So now I'm going to be stuck behind this one individual who's got, $25,000, $25 sign-off process, not $4 million sign-off. How did you open that up? Because I think lots of people get stuck there.
Yeah, look, it was a couple of things. One is we were always very collaborative. In every one of these early ventures, we didn't go around people. I always found if you broke trust with people that were sponsoring your activity inside of an organization, was a surefire way to get yourself stonewalled, right? So one, we made sure that we were quite open and we were transparent with our questioning and the conversations. And second thing is that we couched that in that additional discovery with clients in this very nice space of genuine business curiosity and outcomes, and saying we can deliver the software to you, but you're not buying software for software's sake. You're buying software because you want to have an impact on the business processes that you're involved in. And those business processes drive KPIs that your leadership are looking at every single day. But the leadership that's looking at the performance of these processes are not single-fold, they're multifold. So we've got a CFO, you might have a procurement leader, you might have a supply chain leader. They're all going to be looking at different KPIs, and those are the lens through which they measure success and value. And in order to give the person comfort, the way we would explain it was that we were looking to cover off those people to ensure that we had a really good sense of what those KPIs were and how we were going to positively impact on those KPIs so that they looked good, that we were de-risking the projects and the programs that we were looking to put in place, right? And then we would drive the conversation. And they would often sponsor, on the back of that approach, they would sponsor the conversations to go and talk to other individuals.
Yeah, that's incredible, Greg. I think, key what I got out of that is a real focus on what are the business outcomes that each of the leaders you're talking to get measured on, and a real genuine empathetic view about their day-to-day, how they run their business, what success looks like, etc. So you almost become part of their team in that conversation where you're myopically focused on how they're measured, how they improve, what they do to get better, etc. And I love what you said. It's not about the software. It's about what the software can do to improve the business processes and the KPIs. So that's fundamental. I think anybody listening to this loud and clear, one of the biggest problems I see, and I know this is one of your pet peeves, Dan, is you join an organization as a salesperson, the first thing they do is give you the first call deck. And that typically is 50 slides on why the software is great. And I think, Greg, what you're saying is it's probably the worst thing you could possibly do to build trust and gain momentum in a sales cycle. Yeah. So do you see?
Completely right. And it's about how you tell those stories, Simon. And, I think one of the things, and you'd relate to this because we worked together for so many years, I always considered myself a massive champion of authentic curiosity. And I'd always say to salespeople, if you honestly, when you sit at night and you'd say, I'm honestly really not that interested in my client's business, then find a different territory.
Yeah.
Because you can't fake authenticity. When you go and sit with these individuals, you can't fake it. You've got to be genuinely interested in their business and what it is they're striving for and their ambition to grow their own organization. If you're genuinely curious about that and are interested in that and you're leaning into that conversation, that translates. Most people that they will see that in the way that you're driving that conversation. And then 9 times out of 10, there's always an outlier, but 9 times out of 10 people will respond quite positively to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Greg, I think part of that is salespeople too often become focused on their own number like it's real. And the number at the end of the month or the quarter or whatever their measurement cycle is, getting to that number is the deliverable. Whereas if they change the focus, and that's what I kind of heard from the stories you're sharing here, is you change the focus to be, I'm focused on my customer getting the outcomes that they should if they engage with us. If you focus on those things, the transactions occur, the deals grow, your customer trusts you long term, all the things you want to do as great business people, which is get referrals, and all those things come when you genuinely become curious at its core around your industry, around your segment, around your technology. You won't have the answers to all the questions. No one's expecting that of you. That's why we have networks and colleagues and people who work with us to try and grow that out. And even if they don't know the answer, often your customers know that you don't have all the answers. And we might have to work this out on the journey, or maybe there isn't an answer to that question right now.
And don't be afraid of it. I think that, I've always said through to other sales leaders is one of the downsides of having such a great brand and a really structured talent acquisition process is we hire incredibly talented people. And the problem with a lot of very top talented individuals is you guys will relate to this. You have such high expectations of yourself, right? And when you've got really high expectations, you almost feel like You don't want to go out and talk to a client about stuff where you don't actually know the answer ahead of time. And I was saying, the more confident salespeople, the better salespeople get comfortable being uncomfortable. They get comfortable in the knowledge that they've definitely done their homework, but they're prepared to go out and explore areas with the client where they don't really know what the answer is going to be and where that might lead you. And frankly, in my, 25, 30 years of experience in selling, I'd say those have been the conversations 9 times out of 10 that have led to the bigger deals, the way more interesting transactions and partnerships that we've established with other clients.
And sometimes it's as simple as just a question of, hey, listen, I don't know the answer to that, but how important is that to your business? And should we all spend some time working that out? When a customer says yes, all of a sudden, it opens up Pandora's box. Not Pandora's box, it's the wrong analogy, but like it opens up a treasure box of what might be inside with this customer.
Greg, you've talked about building trust and curiosity about your client. Look, we've worked together a long time. One of the traits I always loved about the way you operate is it's the team and the collaboration amongst your colleagues as well. I've seen you develop some friendships over time, but when you guys sit down, you mentioned Murray. All I think of when you talk about Murray Bush and Greg Arbour, I just think about people laughing in a room with a whiteboard for hours and hours and hours on end. And, you build these really interesting, trusted internal relationships. You sit there with a whiteboard, but you're generally good mates, and you'll go out, with the team and have a couple of beers and always bouncing ideas off each other. How important is it to you to have a bunch of colleagues around you that, are almost your best mates that you riff off? You're constantly challenging each other to get better, and you just look like you're having a great time.
It's critical. I mean, I couldn't put a high enough mark on that requirement. Sales can be a very lonely job, and whether you're in a direct quota carrying role yourself as an AE, whether you're managing a sales territory, and as you move further up in your sales career, as I've done to now, managing a geography that's half the planet, everywhere from the Middle East to China, you can become increasingly lonely. And you've got to have some people that are not yes people that look at your title and get awed and feel like they need to tell you what you want to hear. You want to have people around you that can still be honest, that are genuinely telling you what the customer's saying. Where are those listening posts that you've got that have got the voice of customer deeply embedded inside of them, so that you keep yourself real and grounded in terms of the way that you work. The second thing I think it's so important about that is in the tech industry today, a lot of the problems we're solving are inherently very complicated solutions to solve. The very easy stuff, a lot of these clients have got very smart people that are solving it themselves. So we are out there trying to solve some of the more complicated things. And most often it requires a community of people to come together. The most successful AEs, I think, are the ones that are able to collaborate and harness the power of the organization to really help solve the problems for clients. Moreover, then look how smart and amazing I am as an individual myself, right? And actually, it's quite interesting because I believe, having been on the client side, clients value that as well. They're looking for an account executive, a representative. If you think about the word, it's a representative into that organization. That means someone that will go and get stuff done. They'll find the right person. You don't expect they're going to know everything, but what you do expect is they're going to work their little tail off to go and find the right person within the organization who can come back and help. And I think that if you do that and you have fun, much more fun, being successful together. There's too few organizations having fun, right? And I think it's something you've got to watch as a sales leader, right? If it's all about the quarter, it's all about the linearity, the only conversations we're having around the gaps, and particularly when discretionary spend, macroeconomic, geopolitical environments are like the environments we find ourselves in today, it's very easy to find yourself just having that conversation with your sales teams. And right now, you need to speak to the heart of people. You need that intrinsic motivation that really inspires people to go and be pretty special every day. These are difficult jobs. We're asking people to go and solve difficult problems, but not a lot of free cash around, right? So I would say that's a really important thing for us to focus on with the teams that we're playing with.
Absolutely. So, Greg,
Greg,
just thinking through, you've talked about the team. We grew up in this space, 15, 20 years ago. We cut our teeth where you turned up to an office every single day and you were able to build relationships with your team. Obviously, over the last 3 or 4 years, we're quite different, right? As you mentioned, times have changed, and we're sitting here doing a podcast over a video stream right now. I struggle to see how younger boys and girls coming through wanting to be top salespeople, running their entire careers from a Zoom screen or a Teams screen, etc. What's your advice to sort of younger people coming up, given what we've just said about the importance of collaboration and building real meaningful relationships with your colleagues? Are we losing that? How do we keep that spark going as an industry?
Yeah, look, Simon, it's an absolutely brilliant question. And I do think we are losing it, and I think I think there are so many young folk in our organizations today, men and women, young boys and girls that are so obsessed on balance and my rights to kind of work everywhere in this kind of free world, in a virtual world. And some of the lessons of working in a team environment are genuinely some of the best lessons that you learn to really create the bedrock and foundations of skills for your career going forward. And, with all due respect to Zoom and to Microsoft Teams and other technologies on virtual collaboration, they're not the same as that in-person collaboration. If I was a young person right now, as I talk to my son about his role in tech sales, I'm saying it doesn't matter whether you've got an open door policy at work where you can work 5 days a week at home. Don't. Go into the office. Go and spend 3 days a week in the office. Go and plan your week out. Do the one day that you're there. Do all the admin and the stuff that you need to do while you're actually in the office. Make sure you have that opportunity to connect with others. It's those corridor conversations that are so enriching. And you'll never know when you need to lean on some of those friendships and those relationships. And when those anecdotes that you've heard over lunch and stuff start to become very useful. And that's when your role as a representative of the company to the client, you start to really impart some of that knowledge. The second thing is don't steer away from going to your clients. I think we've lost some of the skill of actually walking the corridors. We always used to talk about pounding the corridors of our customers. We'd pride ourselves. You'd see great salespeople who would say, well, here's my card for this customer and here's my card for that customer. And it's because they virtually were, they were there at least a day or two a week getting to know those clients. And a lot of the clients that we work for don't have the same open policy to virtual working that we do in the tech industry as well. So I think you've got to mirror some of that. But, to me, it's critical. I, irrespective of what your own company policy is, I would encourage particularly people in the early part of their career or people taking on a new role or a new sales territory or new industry sector that they're looking after. I'd over-invest in spending time in the office, engaging with other people and finding, better ways to balance it.
So, Greg, if you're leading a small team now, so I think it's easy for us to say to an AE what you should do, right? But I think a lot of those engagements and models of what good looks like are kind of set by your leader. Even if you've been around for a while, you join a new organization and, hey, you turn up to the office and there's no one here. Why am I driving 25, 30 minutes to get it's been sitting on a smelly train for me to get to the office and there's nobody there. So how do you think a first line or second line leader should be focusing on building those types of engagements? Like, what are the types of things you recommend that they either build into their culture or their team or ask their business for? Like, how do you build that re-engagement?
Well, Dan, it sounds very cliche, but you've got to be the change you want to see. Role modeling.
Yeah.
And I'll take it to a little bit of a story. So, in one of the last roles I did at SAP, I took on a role as a senior vice president to run all of their intelligent spend solutions. So Ariba and Fieldglass and all of SAP's assets that they'd acquired that were all involved in procurement and how do we drive smart, intelligent procurement across the market. This is one of the areas of SAP I'd not actually spent a huge amount of time. I didn't know a lot of those people. A lot of those folk had come through acquisitions. So I didn't have a lot of relationships. And I got appointed to that role literally as COVID hit, right? And I was in an Asia Pac responsibility, Asia Pac wide. I didn't know a lot of these people. I had a COO, a chief of staff, a whole sales organization. I've never met anyone. I've never met any of them. And as stuff started to open up, we were stuck in the situation where people were working virtually all of the time. There were a couple of things that we did. One is I made sure as a leader that our team calls, we had our videos on as much as we could, but the team calls had enough space in them that we could get to know each other a little bit as well. So, we actually did start off a little bit of an internal conversation where we had a lot of leaders of different parts of the area, the different customer success leader, COO, myself, various other leaders that were playing different leadership roles in our business, actually coming and sharing their career story with other people in the organization, made us kind of tangible, made us a bit more real. As things then opened up, what I started to do with my immediate team is I said, I'm going to be in on a Tuesday. It's just as a first day. So I'm going to come in on a Tuesday. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, train, do all the various bits and pieces, but I'm coming in. And funny enough, nominating a single day, I found other people would turn up, and that cascaded through the organization, and that role modeling, I think is a hugely impactful way to work. And irrespective of whether it's the questioning techniques that you want, whether it's getting people into the office, when you find top leaders role modeling the behavior, lots of really good stuff changes. And if you continue to do it, so it's not just a one-off, we came in for one big workshop, but, I'm consistently here each week. I'll make some time in the diary. I made sure that my office had set aside 90 minutes every single time I was in the office just to connect with people, so that people that were in the office could come and talk to me, ask me my advice. If I could help, I would, right? And I think that was a really important thing to do. And I learned that trick from Gail Kelly, actually, when, she was running St. George Bank and I was doing some consulting work for her. And she was trying to really retweak that St. George kind of bank, the branch environment to be more of a sales environment. I remember running this project with them, thinking about all the smart things we could do to turn these branches into a sales environment. Then at one of the steering committee briefing meetings, Gail turned around to me, as another good South African does, and she said, "Well, what do I do?" I thought, shit. Well, we hadn't really thought that one through, the changes for everyone else. And she went, "No, the change is for all of us, and I've got to lead the change." So, and I said, "Well, actually, I don't know. I must be honest. I haven't got the answer for that. I hadn't thought that through." And I was working with a guy called Nick Wild, and he thought I was mad for saying that I didn't know the answer. But what it led to is that Gail then sat down and we spent some time, and she figured out what she would do is she'd just call a couple of customers and thank them for being a customer of the bank. And that's all she would do. And she started to do 2 phone calls every single day, call a couple of customers and just say, thanks for being a customer. It was a bit of a laugh because she said it took her more time to convince him that it was, in fact, was calling, but it wasn't a prank call. But what was really funny is that her leadership watched that and went, wow, if Gail's got time to make 2 calls, why don't I? Right? And that just trickled through the organization. And I think, the scoreboard shows what happened at St. George. They set themselves apart relative to a banking world at the time that was renowned for being very uncustomer centric. They were not terribly customer centric, and St. George really set itself apart in that way. And it wasn't the only thing, but I dare say it was one of the key triggers. There was that behavior, and I learned that from her. And I took that into my own business, and it really worked.
That's a really interesting insight, which is like, because you think so many organizations will look at that need for change, and the way they'll deal with it is, I'm going to mandate something. I'm going to tell everyone they've got to be in 3 days a week. Or I'm going to, hey, if I'm going to, I need to cut spend. I'm going to tell everyone I'm going to cut spend by 25%. In fact, particular organization that I used to work for, I used to laugh quite regularly. We were, you could tell when we're going to make an acquisition coming up, because all of a sudden the CEO would say to everybody, we've got to reduce T&E. Yet then you'd see a couple of days later, the particular CEO flung on a jet. Hold on. This is not living.
Yeah. I mean,
this is not living what
Dan,
you're
you're
talking.
100%. You see it all the time. It's like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah,
right. And
absolutely.
most of our sales teams are not idiots. They see that, right? And no one buys into that. If you're sending out something saying turn up 3 days a week, but you never ever see the leader there,
Yeah.
right? If please watch every expense, and then you see them on Twitter flying, first class all over the place and massive bottles of champagne. You got to think about the optics, right?
Absolutely. But I think that what you're sharing there is the insight is, don't mandate it. In fact, don't even tell everyone you're doing it. Have a plan, have an intention. Gail built the model of what she was going to do with intention. And she probably thought, if people see me doing this, hey, I'm role modeling it for others. This is setting the standard, and this is what's really important. And and then would probably measure. My guess is, hey, are we seeing more of my leaders going through this process? Are we actually seeing that change? But also allowing them to step into what change meant for their particular department or division or whatever it may be. But hey, listen, I'm actually exhibiting this change myself, but didn't mandate every executive needs to make 2 calls, because now it becomes about measuring versus just what are we seeing as an output. That's a really
and I've got to say that time, setting aside the time while I was in the office was actually something that was really important too. And I'd recommend it for any sales leader that's leading teams, and that's something that was a lesson I learned from my EA, Deborah Ballard, who was amazing. And she said, Greg, you come in the office and you've got back-to-back meetings. I literally had to bloody book time to go to the loo, and it was so intense. It was all the right things to be doing and all very important meetings. But, then you might as well just have been at home, because no one ever got to talk to you. You didn't really collaborate and engage with anyone. It's actually setting aside 90 minutes where you truly could go and see the whites of the eyes of people, actually put your phone to the side and actually genuinely listen to your team and the things they were raising. I mean, you picked up some incredible wisdom in that moment. You felt the temperature of your sales team in a much more authentic way than you did if you were reading it as an email or some, survey outcome that HR would be sending you. And I think, for me, that was very rich and very rewarding.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Simon?
I've learned a few things on this podcast. It's been awesome. I think, look, we're probably getting to the top of the hour, and as we always do, Greg, it's been spectacular to chat to you. But mate, if you think back over that, you did date yourself, 30-odd year career. You've learned a few things, mate, over the time. What's changed in tech over that time? The actual technology has, but there's some of the fundamentals I think that you refer to are almost timeless. As you reflect on that, are there any 2 or 3 pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share with us? Things that have really resonated. I think you've had some spectacular stories. You've been, for me personally, the fact that you're aware enough to watch someone like Gail Kelly do what she does and be a spectacular leader. And I think one of the greatest skills you can have is someone that observes greatness or sees something that's fantastic and then goes, well, how do I apply that to my everyday? I can see that in yourself. You've got a bunch of people on the listening to this podcast that have certainly enjoyed the stories, but any sort of pearls of wisdom, things that sort of strike you as fairly foundational for Greg as he's gone through that 30-year career?
Yeah, look, I think, Simon, I mean, there's so many things, but, at its absolute core is this obsession with your own clients and the curiosity around their own growth ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that you're passionate about the company you work for, well, hopefully you are, the employees of your clients are equally passionate about their businesses. They are thinking about how they pay the school fees or, buy that property or whatever it is that they want to do with the commercial return from that engagement by their own organizations being successful. So I would say to any salesperson, invest in that. Invest in that and understand intimately what are the drivers of growth? What are the ambitions that your client has as an organization? And then stand back from that and think, why does my organization and the services and the products that we offer, what does it matter in the context of that client's ambition? And what does it matter today? And if we were really spectacular in the way that we drove a partnership and a relationship, what would that look like in 3 years? So don't just have a 1 quarter view on something. Have a longer term ambition. Share with the customer that when you're thinking about them, you're thinking about a longer term commitment and relationship. And I'm telling you that longer term relationship, that genuine interest and curiosity in how you help their organization be better will be reciprocated in kind, in terms of the way that you work. The second thing is I would try and make, big change comes through small tweaks. Paul Mitchell from the Human Enterprise taught me this through one of his L5 leadership programs, and it's always stuck with me. That if you do something in a repeated way many, many times over, and you just make it like a habit, build rituals and habits, things really start to stick, right? So, I think when you're driving into these conversations with clients, thinking about the KPIs, thinking about understanding what the different motivations are from a CFO perspective, from a procurement perspective, an HR perspective, the CEO's perspective, or the board's perspective. Everyone's got a different lens through which they're looking at performance and looking at success and growth. And you need to understand those perspectives if you really want to be able to collaborate and relate with an organization. Success will come through your ability to harness the power of your community. So build a network, engage with people across your organization, and don't try and do it all alone. And for hell, right, it's a lot more fun doing it with friends and friends that you can have for a lifetime. And I think I'm talking about that here, right? The people that will see that genuine kind of that genuine relationship. So try and kind of, I think, lean on friends. Don't, be in such a rush to know the answer to every single problem that a client's trying to solve, and be there as well equally for your colleagues too. I don't think we practice enough. I think we've gotten out of a habit of practicing. How many times we go out to a client and we hadn't really role played or already thought through the questions that we're going to put to a client and why those questions are important in the context of their business, right? We often just fly out and we're waiting for some pre-sales person to kind of have the demo ready or have the slides ready. And we're all trying to figure out how do we deliver 35 slides in the 20 minutes that's been allocated to us, right? Less is more. Yes. Less is more. So,
100%.
Hone in on that, have some fun with some friends. And then, I think for the sales leadership, I genuinely would impart the strongest sales leaders I've ever worked with. One are hard on the numbers, but soft on people. They embrace the human capital that we've got in our organizations to be successful. And they focus their attention equally on building a future pipeline as well as delivering on a very predictable business outcome and result in the current quarter. Great sales leaders are watching the future pipeline and the dimensions of that pipeline and the quality of that pipeline as much as they are looking at their current quarter, their current week, as the linearity starts to drive us to nowadays, right? So, for me, those would be some of the kind of the key lessons that I would lead. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but these are some of the things that I would put out there. And last of all, don't take yourself too seriously, right? You've got to have some fun and be a human being at the end of the day, because that's what people like to engage with.
Hallelujah.
Greg, that
Completely
was
agree.
amazing. Hallelujah. Absolutely. Honestly, we asked that question at the end of each podcast, man. I think that's the most comprehensive answer we've had from anybody on the episodes we've done so far. Man, that was exceptional. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. I know Simon was so excited when he shared that you were joining the podcast. So, man, I really appreciate your time and effort. I know all of our listeners will just be blown away by the stories and also the insights you've shared. You've had a phenomenal career, so congratulations on that. I know you've got some exciting things coming up in that career. And, no matter where you end up over the next 10, 15 years, whatever you want to do. But for everyone listening, thank you so much for joining myself, Simon, and Greg today. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that subscribe button and the like down below. If you're watching or listening to us, on Apple or Spotify, click the plus sign so we can tell you when the next episode's coming up. For everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Greg, Simon, thank you again. Everyone, have a great